Ben Habib is the leader of a new political party, relatively new, Advance UK. He'd previously been a member of Reform, but Nigel Farage gave him the boot. Over the weekend, he spoke to Somali-Dutch-American writer Ayaan Hirsi Ali.
I also want to give you and other Westerners who are listening that most Westerners think, when they think about civil war, they think only about the end stage of what a civil war. That's when people are shooting one another and, like the former Yugoslavia or Somalia or the Democratic Republic of Congo. So they think that that's when all the institutions break down and there's an exodus of citizens leaving the country. That's when they think, when they think about civil war, that's what they think about. But you forget that the very early stages of civic decline and crumbling and cracking. And so just now, as you were saying, we're on the brink of violence. There is this low-level violence that's already underway. And when I talk about low-level violence, I'm talking about, again, when I came to the West, there was a clear monopoly of violence that the state had. The state guaranteed public order. And now you're seeing government after government, and the United Kingdom is really out there with the others, where the government no longer has the monopoly of violence and can no longer guarantee public order. And what people have been doing over many years is to, when that public order breaks down in a particular neighborhood, they move. It's called the white flight. That's the phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And then they move from the suburbs to the countryside and then eventually out of the country. So again, Britain has this huge emigration of the middle classes. That's the backbone of your society. And they've left mainly because of this breakdown of public order.
It's real. A lady born in Somalia who then went to the Netherlands, who's now in the US, is telling a British Pakistani that because there's more fly tipping where you live and more HMOs and more rough sleeping, apparently we're headed for civil war. And it's to do with more brown people and white flight. And I mean, white flight goes back to the 60s in the US. There's been white flight for 60 years in certain parts of the US, like Detroit. And the state no longer has a monopoly on violence. When she first came to Europe, apparently it did. There were no protests. There were no riots. The poll tax riot of the early 1990s, that never happened because, of course, the state had a monopoly on violence. The world, when I say the world, the West, Britain, was much more violent in the 1990s than it is now. Much more. Now, I'm not one of these sort of Whiggish liberals who thinks everything's getting better, because it's not. But it was, primarily because we had a lot more young people. Younger societies are much more violent than older societies. Britain is less violent today. Tons of bad stuff happens. More than 10 years ago, shoplifting is out of control. But anybody who's my age or older knows that Bournemouth Town Centre or Cardiff City Centre on a Friday night, or Reading Town Centre on a Friday night 30 years ago was a lot more violent than it is now. Okay? Just is. A lot more booze, a lot more casual violence, a lot more. Later on, Habib announced that Ali would be advising his party.
Now, sadly, I know you're not on the electoral roll in this country.
No, I'm an American citizen.
You're an American citizen. Well, we can always try and rectify that in due course.
I'm a very proud and happy and grateful American citizen. And it's also the only citizenship I want.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Bad for the United Kingdom. But what I would like to invite you can't therefore be a member of our political party, I'm afraid. But I know you love this country, and your vision, your understanding of the issues, your understanding of what needs to be done to rescue Western civilization in the United Kingdom are second to none. And therefore, may I invite you, Ayaan, to become a special advisor to the board of Advance UK, so that we can call upon you when we're making our policies for the restoration of our great country. Would you accept that role?
It's an honor and a pleasure to accept that role. And I really love it that you use the word restoration, because that really is the project at heart.
Yeah, well, I'm utterly delighted to have had this conversation, and more than utterly delighted that you've accepted that role, Ayaan. It's terrific. And I will introduce you to the head of policy. I think you briefly met him on the way into this interview.
Yeah.
And he will be driving it. He's a very, very good man. And I look forward to working with you closely as we rescue our country.
Rescue and restore.
Rescue and restore our country.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for coming on
again. I wish
again.
you all the very best.
Imagine being a white nationalist. Imagine being a white nationalist neo-Nazi and a Somali lady is talking to a British Pakistani guy about restoring the West. Wait, what's going on? Restoring the West. We probably can't go back. We can go forward. We can learn some good things about the past, but we probably can't literally go back. And if we do, her and him and me and you probably won't be here. I'd quite like to stay personally. I want to finish up by going to this piece by Ayaan for Unheard, where, for the record, I also sometimes write. Here's the title. Why I'm Now a Christian. Atheism Can't Equip Us for Civilizational War. There's a theme here, isn't there? That article is really important for stating a certain position on the radical right. After talking about her rejection of Islam and embrace of atheism, Ali writes this. So what changed? Why do I call myself a Christian now? Part of the answer is global. Western civilization is under threat from three different but related forces. The resurgence of great power authoritarianism and expansionism in the forms of the Chinese Communist Party and Vladimir Putin's Russia. Imagine the priest on a Sunday. Why are you here? You've come to mass all the time all of a sudden. Well, because of Putin and Xi. The rise of global Islamism, which threatens to mobilize a vast population against the West. And the viral spread of woke ideology, which is eating into the moral fiber of the next generation. We endeavor to fend off these threats with modern secular tools, military, economic, diplomatic, and technological efforts to defeat, bribe, persuade, appease, or surveil. And yet, with every round of conflict, we find ourselves losing ground. We're either running out of money with our national debt in the tens of trillions of dollars. That's because of pensions liabilities for many countries. Or we're losing our lead in the technological race with China. But we can't fight off these formidable forces unless we can answer the question, what is it that unites us? The response that God is dead seems insufficient. So too does the attempt to find solace in, quote, the rules-based liberal international order. The only credible answer, I believe, lies in our desire to uphold the legacy of the Judeo-Christian tradition. Kind of not how it works, right? I believe in God. Why? Well, because in the civilizational conflict with Xi's China, we need it in order to have the right civilizational tools. That's not how it. Do you believe or not believe? I mean, that actually underpins the weakness of your argument, right? The whole thing's a LARP. The whole thing is live action role play. I'm going to LARP being a Christian because we're in this civilizational conflict, and to have some sort of coherent civilizational veneer for all these different places, which are actually really different, we're going to have to talk about Christendom 2.0. Kieran, you've seen a few videos there and a few screenshots from an article. I mean, to me, this really betrays the vacuity that surrounds lots of the radical right.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a serious person. That's the first thing to say, I think. Deeply unserious individual. And that was one of the cringiest things I've ever watched. When he offers her the role on the board of his new party, it was like something from Alan Partridge or something. It was very, very cringy. But he's a deeply unserious person. And look, people would said last week when we did the segment on Nick Fuentes, why are you giving this guy airtime? Why are you doing this? Blah, blah, blah. Again, a very deeply unserious person. They might say the same about this, but actually I think it's very important because A, these people are popular. They speak to a shift, unfortunately, a groundswell that we have to take seriously, a constituency in politics, in let's call it the West. But also it's useful for sort of fishing out patterns. And I think it's very clear what the pattern is across Fuentes to Ayaan Hirsi Ali this week, which is war. They're obsessed with this idea that society is on the brink of a civil war. There was I did this with Fuentes, but it's such a rich vein. This is not new. These guys are absolutely LARPing. They're absolutely charlatanic.
Oh, I like that. I've never heard that adjective before.
Charlatanic.
Charlatanic, I like it.
They're absolutely charlatanic, but they are drawing on a reserve of prior examples. So let's just take one more. I think it's really relevant. Enoch Powell talked about war. He talked about rivers of blood. Nothing of the such happened. When Ayaan Hirsi Ali talks about the monopoly on violence, she's invoking a German sociologist called Max Weber. The thing Max Weber said was the biggest threat of state monopoly of violence was a terrorist organisation or terrorism. In Britain, up until the late 1990s, there was not domestic, but the IRA were very, very active across Britain. That was a genuine threat to the legitimacy of the state, monopoly of the state on violence. That was a genuine threat to it.
I mean, they almost killed the PM twice.
Right. They almost killed the PM twice. So, this mythical past that is constantly appealed to, I know we all know it's bullshit, really. But I think it's important to fish out the patterns across charlatans like Fuentes and Ayaan Hirsi Ali and see that it is part of a coordinated, crystallized project. Even if they're not on the phone to each other, coordinating, sharing briefing papers and all the rest of it, they clearly all want the same thing, which is for us to all believe that we're on the verge of war. Crime is, as you said, Aaron, and as we've said in this show, there are loads of serious structural problems which make life worse today than it was before. But actually, crime and violence in our societies is on the decline, and long may that continue. So, same playbook, different moron.
I kind of miss the old conservatives, like Thatcher, and their whole thing was get rich, make money, right? That was the talking point of the right. Get rich. The left are stupid because they don't want you to get rich. Get rich. Now the only people saying that in bourgeoisie, it is glorious to get rich, are the Chinese. Get rich, make money, do stuff, progress. But I'm a socialist. That's not my vibe. But I prefer the whole get rich, make loads of money than, hey, we're headed for a civilizational war, and that's why I'm going to LARP Christianity. And by the way, that's why your sons and daughters need to join the army. If that's the promise of the radical right, it's not going to survive contact with reality for more than 10 minutes. Trump can do something like that in the US to some extent because it's this enormous power with an unprecedented capacity to finance deficits because of what it does. No European country can do this without living standards plummeting. It is not a positive propositional vision for the future. The terrifying thing, though, is that the left doesn't have one either. And so we're in this weird moment where, like you say, lots of people are being attracted to this stuff, where it's A, idiotic, and B, I mean, it's not even actually very appealing. It's not very appealing. Who finds that appealing? Thatcher, I get. Make loads of money, privatization, smash organized labor. Everybody is a temporarily embarrassed millionaire or billionaire. Okay, I get it, right? Where's the romance here?
But I think
quickly, Kieran, go on.
Sorry. Just very briefly as a final thought, I think you could argue there's a dialectic going on there, that the Thatcherite vision and the actual impacts of the Thatcherite vision on society, the way it creates, privatization, deregulation, and the impacts that has, kind of less fettered capitalism has on society, has led us to where we are with the right. And led us to where we are because they're scrambling. There's so little materially for them. They're scrambling in the margins. Of course. And the incentive structure now with, technological evolution and all the rest of it. But particularly, the way in which the socioeconomic base is now is to try and outdo each other in terms of who can be the most right wing and who can be the most insane and who can be the most kind of doomsaying and warmongering.
Well, it's that same thing of, like I say, get rich or whatever you get with Thatcher. In a low or no growth society, that's clearly not a viable politics, right? So instead you get this man is a wolf to man, exploit everyone. We're headed for civilizational conflict with China, Russia, and Islam. I mean, my God. You sound insane. And it is insane, but it's also increasingly a mainstream politics.